And so keeping in mind this recognition that we're going to die and probably suffer pretty badly
Mhm.
beforehand, does that mean that the mundane experience of now, just a short walk across my lawn or whatever it might be, looking up at the sky, is that much richer because of the awareness that you have around the losing nature of the game?
Simon, I cannot even express to you how much richer it is when you realize in this moment, all these bad things that must occur sooner or later are not occurring. How rich that is. See, like speaking to you now, this is the greatest. I'm not in pain, and I have been in serious pain. I have no appointment with the doctor later today to find out what's wrong. Um, the hordes are not beating down my door. I'm just here, and it's beautiful. A lot of people are always seeking happiness, and I think it's a wrong focus. Peace is much better than happiness. Then happiness can occur, and when it does, you enjoy it. It's like a wind in the trees. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. But if you're peaceful, you notice when you're happy. And when you're not happy, you don't wish that you were. You don't say, I was happy last week. When that girl smiled at me, it made me so happy. When you're old like me and a girl smiles at you, it's wonderful. you, you, it really is. You mentioned a dashing young Robert, but he's gone. But every now and then, some sweet young thing will notice the few remains of that dashing Robert and kind of, oh, wow, this is great. And so if that happened to me yesterday, I won't walk around today wishing that it would happen again. I'll be in what is now, and I'll be peaceful and not expecting the next thing to make me happy. This is so simple, but it's hard to express in words. It really is.
So that piece, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I understand what you mean. And I think this is increasingly become my experience too, is being okay with whatever happens to be happening, because life is this stream of one bloody thing after another, as Winston Churchill put it. But if you can be in line with that, then you can be at peace during that.
I love that Churchill quote. I think the way I heard it is history is one damn thing after another. This is brilliant, right? Yes. Well, that's it. That's it right there. He had his finger on the pulse. Shit happens and it keeps happening. And the wise among us understand that in advance going in. And you just swallow your life. You chew it up and swallow it bite by bite. Sometimes it tastes good, sometimes it doesn't, but you have to keep swallowing it. What's the alternative? See, the alternative is to escape and and be in this hypnotic trance. And that is culture. Culture wants you in the hypnotic trance. They don't want free. The culture at large can't use liberated people. They don't serve any purpose. They're not always striving. You can't tempt them with riches and fame and all that. They don't care. They don't need it. So the rest of us are programmed to attain, always be attaining, always get the next thing, always onward and upward. And that is when you become robotic and you're escaping into these fantasies of attainment.
In terms of someone then who is, let's say, who is suffering, and you've faced a lot of suffering as a psychotherapist, but particularly so, for example, let's say with depression or anxiety, and I've had my fair bout of anxiety and I've still got a sensitive nervous system. How can this swallowing your life and recognizing that, you're never going to be completely free of the um of what we, well, free of everything that we want to be free of. How can this talk, what we're talking about here, how can that help someone who is really in the pits of depression, or really in the pits of suffering, do you think?
Well, psychotherapy is a healing modality. You don't tell the truth in therapy. You try to alleviate suffering if the suffering is that intense. Maybe restore that person to a condition where then you could speak this way. But I wouldn't take a depressed person and say, don't worry, you're going to die someday. It'll all be over in the end. I mean, that's not really helpful. So, I mean, you have to meet each client on the ground that of their own being, not of my being as a therapist. It's not about Robert when I'm a therapist. So I can't really generalize. But and depression is very difficult to deal with talk therapy. Usually these days they resort to the chemicals quickly.
Was there a common belief that underpinned a lot of the suffering that you noticed, or anything like that?
Well, I see it's tempting now to say, well, we all suffer because some of the people you've interviewed talk that way. If only you could understand this one thing, you'd be cool for the rest of your life. There'd be no more suffering. It's so simple. We're not actually people. We don't really exist. So how can we be suffering? And see, I don't see it that way. I see that we're human animals, and dogs and cats suffer emotionally also. It's not just us humans, and they don't have any ideas in their mind. So it's not a question of taking the bad ideas out and putting God or something in there, and that'll fix everything. Um, you can't do that to a dog, but a dog will still suffer. Dog will suffer terribly, emotionally. And we're like dogs, just more evolved. So we're going to suffer. And I think what the therapist learns is everyone is suffering. Me too. The therapist is suffering and the clients are suffering. So what I'm talking about is not ridding oneself of suffering. What I'm talking about is when I suffer, and I do, I understand there's the only alternative is some kind of escapist movement, and I'm not willing to spend my life escaping. Going back to Alan Watts. Alan Watts said, when you dance, when they're playing music and you dance, you know this one. He says, you don't dance to arrive at some particular place on the floor. You just dance. And he said, what if life was a musical thing and you were supposed to dance?